Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is none other than West Memphis Prime Time in the heart of West Memphis, Arkansas. I'm your host, Dr. B, in the studio, BBS Productions. And we are so glad to have you in on the broadcast with us today. If you will, if you're on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. So every time we go live, you'll get a notification. We are just so excited to have Charles Holly, author from Huntsville, Alabama, down in Alabama. And we got to have him again for this part two on the book, uh, Black and White. This is awesome. This is an awesome book. I've ordered several books for friends of mine, and it talks about a balanced discussion. Yeah, if you get the book, I'm telling you, you're gonna get something out of it. You're gonna. I don't think you will be displeased. It talks about healing racial divide. Now, we are so much division in the country. So if we do our part and get the tools that we need to equip us to do the work that God would have us to do, because then and only then can we move forward. So we're gonna bring in our guest today, Charles Holly. How you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. B, for having me back. I
Yes,
see
sir.
we are still good to go. None of us got attacked.
Ah, no, we
I
didn't get
am
attacked this time.
I'm just ready to go to continue this. I think we had a wonderful past discussion and I'm just raring to continue it.
That's great. Uh, if you would kind of go back on some of the things that we discussed and kind of give us a few highlights, and then we'll move forward. Because I got this one area in page 82 of the book, and that's the part that I really want us to get into just a little bit as we discuss this book today.
Sure, absolutely, no problem. So as I recall, Dr. B, we talked about so many good things, but let me just pick
Mhm.
out a few. We talked about um, the question of whether black people could be racist.
Right.
And I shared that with you. I shared some reasons why
Hmm.
I thought so. I shared the fact that I have family members who are,
Hmm.
and we also talked about why it was so important for
Right.
us as people of color
Hmm.
to really acknowledge that and own up to it, fess it
Right.
basically, because we can't really help someone out of something if we
Right.
don't know what it's like to experience it ourselves,
Exactly.
you know. And so, Dr. B, we also talked about, we went back thousands of years
Hmm.
ago beyond this 400-year Americanized history. We went all the way back to the ancient black kingdoms of
Right.
Kush
Hmm.
and Moors. And we even talked about the Bible in Egypt, that the Egyptians were actually black. And
Right.
we actually talked about the fact that in the book of Exodus, that the first mass mass slavery
Hmm.
recorded in the book of Exodus did not involve white people at all.
Wow.
That it was between a group of black Egyptians,
Yep.
okay, and a group of people of color of the Jewish Hebraic nation.
Hmm.
So, we have to we cannot believe, or we cannot think that
Hmm.
white people started slavery and
Right.
that only white people have actually carried out slavery. Slavery has been a part of humankind for thousands and thousands of years. And
Hmm.
that's why we have to step back, zoom out, and talk about race
Right.
as a human issue, not
Right.
as a black or white issue, because it
Hmm.
really is a human issue. And then last thing, we also talked about that uh, racism, we can view it like a actual tree, right? That at the roots of the tree, we have people's minds and what people think. And we talk about hatred,
Hmm.
violence, envy, jealousy. and that you can go on up that tree from the roots all the way to the leaves, and then that's where you would see all these various acts of racism,
Right.
discrimination,
Mm-hmm.
systemic racism,
Mm-hmm.
and so forth, violence. And so we talked about the fact that you cannot kill a tree by pulling off the leaves, that you
Right.
got to get it at the root.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the book that I wrote does. That's my whole intention, is to get into people's minds, get into their
Right.
hearts, because only when you change people's minds and their hearts will you affect the tree, affect the actual leaves. You got to
Right.
change the roots if you want to
Mm-hmm.
change the actual leaves.
Right.
So we had a wonderful time.
Mm-hmm. Um, if you don't mind, I want to jump in this thing so bad. Um, in the book on it was I think it's page 48, where you talk about the church is the refuge for racism. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. It is well documented
Hmm.
in history, in fact, that the church, when I say the church, I don't mean everybody in the actual
Right.
church,
Right.
but I mean that there was a whole lot of people
Hmm.
in the church
Hmm.
who supported slavery, who
Right.
propped up slavery,
Hmm.
and who founded the actual racist system that came
Right.
to be the
Hmm.
Atlantic slave trade.
Right.
And they did it basically because of wealth. They
Right.
did it because of wealth, power, prestige.
Hmm.
And there were just far too many people who called themselves Christians
Hmm.
and who called themselves church people, quote unquote,
Right.
who supported
Hmm.
racial supremacy and unfortunately still do today.
Hmm.
So the Southern Church
Right.
and other churches had
Hmm.
major issues with that. They
Right.
were they were pushing uh, improper scripture like the curse of Ham and
Hmm.
trying to justify
Yeah. Yeah.
black people being slaves. They were saying
Right.
that black people should be slaves and that it was God's will that
Right.
black people be slaves. And so it was that was the whole thing that actually set off,
Right.
well, that was the major thing
Hmm.
that actually set off what we would commonly call the Civil War.
Right.
So yes, the too many people, lots of folks in the
Hmm.
church were involved, invested, and actually pastors own slaves,
Right.
themselves. Some
Right.
pastors own slaves.
Hmm.
So, but here is my problem right here. It's just that even after all this time,
Hmm.
even after over 160, close to 200 years, that I don't see a major change in many of the churches
Right.
today. I just don't see a major change. I see some change, but
Hmm.
I don't see a major change
Right.
as to a lot of those churches who believe in that are
Hmm.
coming away from that. I don't see. I
Right.
see a lot of pastors that are very, very apprehensive to talk
Hmm.
about race. Because I've been
Right.
trying to come,
Hmm.
I've been trying to give away books, I've been trying to open up dialogue,
Right.
and it's just not easy at all.
Hmm.
But so for a long time, the church was the quote unquote refuge of
Hmm.
racism.
Right.
And some pastors even invited the Ku Klux Klan to their churches
Mm.
in the 1920s and 1930s. We have pictures of it today. They
Right.
invited the Ku Klux Klan to their church, paraded them across the pulpit,
Right.
and stood up and said, "Yes, these are our brothers and sisters." And while they had on robes,
Hmm.
you know. So the church really, some people in the church really
Hmm.
became invested in that,
Right.
and that infected the church,
Hmm.
quote unquote. And today it still does. And
Right.
so, but I still believe that the
Hmm.
church is the hope. Because when you talk about changing people's character and changing people's hearts, you're
Right.
going to have to do it spiritually. Okay?
Right. Hmm.
It's going to have to be a spiritual job.
Hmm.
So the church has to be the answer. That's why I believe the church will undergo a revival. I believe it will. It has to. in order for us to conquer this thing called racism.
hmm Let me ask you this: when I think about churches, and uh, I've been trying to figure for years why people. It seemed like in the church they don't want to come together. They don't want. Some churches don't want blacks in their church. Some churches don't want whites in their church. And in order for us to come together in the way that God would have us to, we got to come together. We got to drop some of that stuff. And I hate to say it, but you do find that when that discussion is brought up with some of the pastors, they don't even want to discuss it
Right.
because I guess some don't want to upset their congregation, and some
Hmm.
congregations may not want it. So
Right.
it's something that we have to look at. But we can't talk about a coming together, a coming healing racial division
Right.
if we in the church
Right.
don't are not willing to come together. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am thoroughly convinced that the church has to lead. It
mhm,
has to lead.
right.
And when I do workshops, I always start off at churches
Hmm.
in the book of Genesis, and I actually just take my time and I walk through chapter by chapter,
Hmm.
and I show them how beautiful things was and how God used
Right.
color in the sky, right, in the ocean, the
Hmm.
color of animals, the color of trees, of nature. And I just show all these big, beautiful, beautiful, wonderful pictures. And
Hmm.
I ask them one question: what makes this picture look so good?
Right.
And they always say the same thing: the
Hmm.
different colors, the different colors, the different
Right.
colors. And then when I get to the sixth day of God's creation, which is
Hmm.
man,
Right.
then I throw that picture on the screen with a whole lot of different colors, people
Hmm.
with different colors, and then the artist goes quiet. And I
Yeah.
say, okay, so what's wrong?
Right.
Why were you in such awe seeing the beauty of the sky and how God can take a rainbow with all those different colors and
Right.
put it over an ocean and make it look so wonderful?
Right.
Why do you see a picture of fall time and all those beautiful brown leaves and say,
Hmm.
ooh, ah, and then you see a human being with a different
Right.
color, you just go quiet? Because we've been taught
Yes.
we've been taught
Hmm.
basically not to see God's handiwork in
Hmm.
people. We
Right.
see God's handiwork in nature all
Hmm.
around us, but we don't see it when we look at each other.
Right.
And that's what the enemy has come in and stolen and taken from us. You know.
Wow. That's interesting. It's an interesting thought. It's so many things we need to look at. Um, I got to highlight this one part. Talk about the stereotypes today. What are some of the stereotypes and stuff we face
Oh my goodness.
today?
Um, I talk about that in the book, and I list several different stereotypes that
Hmm.
we as black people have been tagged with.
Hmm.
I call it Bob, B-O-B, Bob. And what that stands for, what that stands for is black on bottom.
Mm.
Black on the bottom.
Right.
Anytime you have a society that is built on different classes,
Hmm.
just like the American society was built upon, it was built on different classes of people. If you
Right.
had more wealth, more power, then you had
Hmm.
more prestige. And so you had these social classes,
Right.
from the top to the bottom.
Hmm.
And in every single society that had slaves, and America had slaves were always the bottom of the ladder. They were on
Yeah.
the bottom.
Right. Exactly.
So so we as blacks, as being part of the early American society,
Right.
we were the slaves, which meant
Hmm.
that we were on bottom. So that's why I say blacks were on bottom.
Right.
And so the stereotyping that
Hmm.
some people had to do in order to keep us in our place
Right.
was to make us seem almost inhuman.
Right.
They had to call us names. They had to
Mm-hmm.
make up words for us.
Mm-hmm.
Nigger, uh, jigaboo,
Right.
monkey,
Mm-hmm. Right.
coon,
Mm-hmm.
and so these things had to be done in order to keep us fittingly on the bottom,
Right.
so that other people could continue to be on top. And so our men were
Mm-hmm.
stereotyped, our women were
Right.
stereotyped, and sadly, some of these things still exist today.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, so but that's the downside,
Mm-hmm.
of basically enslaving people is that
Right.
you just don't enslave them. You've got to develop a reason to keep them
Right.
slaves, right? And you've got to develop ways for people not to feel compassionate about them, not to love them, not to care for them,
Mm-hmm.
because when people do those things, they'll start helping us, you know.
Right.
And so people develop ways, stereotypes, things to
Mm-hmm.
call us, things to, we were written about bad in newspapers,
Right.
magazines, and
Mm-hmm.
then when television came, it was on TV too. And so sadly, a lot of that stuff still exists today.
Mm-hmm.
So there you have it.
You know, when I look back on my younger years, and I used to hear some of that stuff, which I lived up north, and
Hmm.
I know it wasn't quite as bad as it was down in the south. But the things that I heard, it's as if they were trying, or people was trying to make you feel like you were nothing, or that you didn't count for anything, you couldn't achieve anything. So it's like you, or say like you will always be on welfare, or you will always be in the system, or you always going to be in the
Yes,
projects, or something like
yes,
that, to
hmm,
try to discourage us to
yes,
strive to 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 get the most out of life that we could. And
hmm,
I was glad for what I end up doing, and end up going in the military,
hmm,
which I actually got my eyes opened up in more in the
hmm,
military than I did in the area in which I live,
yes,
because when the military is folks from everywhere,
hmm,
and I heard and seen everything, and as you say, back on the bottom,
hmm.
that's I was in the Air Force,
Oh,
and I can honestly say it was less of us
hmm,
and more of them,
yeah,
and you didn't really see, at least I didn't. When I was in,
hmm,
I rarely seen the black officers and stuff like that.
hmm,
You seen some black enlisted, a lot of area when I was stationed in Arizona. I only had one black that I could
hmm.
even work around. So
Wow.
it was a situation to where and that discouraged me from being in the military.
Yes,
It probably
yes,
had if had I went in the army or something like that, where there
hmm,
was more African Americans, I may would have
yeah,
stayed in. But being in the Air
hmm,
Force, I decided the best thing for me to do is get out and
hmm,
and go a different path. And
yes,
so that because it hurt me. And my dad
yes,
had explained a lot of this stuff because he was from uh, Brookhaven, Mississippi. That's where he grew up, and then he
oh
went up
wow.
north.
Oh
So
yeah, I know he
he
saw
told
some
us a
stuff.
lot of what we might would face in life,
Yes,
and it's almost like you hear it, but you're not seeing
hmm,
it. And
yes,
then when I went in the military, I got a rude awakening. Uh,
yes,
and
yes,
so the things that he taught us how to deal with situations, you had to really put them into action then. So
hmm, hmm,
it was an
hmm.
interesting situation.
Yes, 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 absolutely. And yet here we are, hundreds of years later, still having to
Right,
fight
right,
certain stereotypes. You
yeah,
know, blacks are dumb.
yeah,
It's like that. So I had a college friend to tell me a
hmm,
very very interesting story about stereotyping. He was a young black man, went to a mostly white college down here in
hmm,
uh, Bama, and he lived in a nice house
hmm,
close to the actual college. His
right,
family had a big nice house.
right,
And one day he was out there cutting the grass. He was just pushing the
Hmm.
lawnmower, cutting the grass. Well, he had some college friends who knew him who were just driving by, and they happened to see him cutting the grass, the
Right.
yard of this huge house, of this big, nice
Hmm.
house.
Right.
Well, the next time his college mates saw him, white people now, next time they saw him, they asked him this question. Listen to this now. They said, "I didn't know you cut grass for a living. Whose yard were you cutting?" So he just said, he just kind of looks at him and says, "My yard, I live there."
Right.
And they were like, "No, no, you don't live in that house.
Ew.
No, you don't. You kidding us.
Yeah.
So see, you see, and I'm talking about this was, maybe two 1980s,
Right.
5, 6, something like that.
Right.
So you see, see what we still have to contend with even today.
Right.
You know, it's sad,
Yeah.
but it's just true.
Yeah. It's interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Um. On let me see. On page what is that? Page 29. It talks about lies and ignorance. It says, in the Christian faith, ignorance does not mean incapable of learning. Rather, it means devoid of truth.
Mhm.
Kind of give us a little information on that.
Yeah. So sometimes people can be willingly ignorant.
Hmm.
Ignorant means that that a person can be incapable of
Hmm.
learning
Right.
certain higher level things. They
Hmm.
just don't have the mental capacity
Hmm.
to grasp certain things. Okay. But when it comes to racism, people have that capacity to grasp it. It's just
Hmm.
that they don't want to.
Right.
Okay. They don't want to. They would rather believe a false narrative, a false
Yeah.
story,
Hmm. Hmm.
than to believe the truth. And so
Right.
people turn their backs, they
Hmm.
close their ears, they close their eyes, and they just do not want to hear,
Hmm.
participate in, or
Hmm.
try to understand the
Right.
real issues behind the racism that we face today. I mean,
Right.
you see it today with so many schools, and so many schools now
Hmm.
where CRT, critical race theory, is
Hmm.
basically being used as a
Hmm.
boogeyman in, in order to stop people from talking about race. Period.
Right.
You know, and so often we get that from people who are scared. They're riddled with guilt. They're scared
Right.
that someone's going to point their finger at them and say, "Hey,
Right.
you did this to us." You
Hmm.
know, so they just prefer to be willingly ignorant. The
Hmm.
word void of the truth, and they just believe a lie. You
Right.
know, so it's sad, but we see it every single day.
Hmm. Yeah, that's something, and it's horrible that things are that way. But well, you can't make folks change.
Right.
Uh, there's I look at this one page. It's page 32, and you talk about the roots of racism. Can you give us a little information on that?
Yeah, since I grew up on a farm,
Hmm.
I always think in terms of root, stem, leaves. So you got this
Okay.
basic plant that has root, stem, and leaves.
Hmm.
And when we talk about root, we mean the very bottom, the thing that makes something grow, and
Right.
that is the roots. And
Okay.
so those things that I talk about are what are these things that cause racism to
Hmm.
just hang around.
Right.
All these years we still got problems with it. We've had problems with it for thousands of years. What are the things? And so I go through some of those things in the book. I
Hmm.
talk about pride,
Right.
about people just want to be superior.
Hmm.
There are some folks who just want to be on top.
Right.
They want all the power, they want all the glory, They want to look better than anybody else at any and all costs. And that's just
Hmm.
plain old pride. And all races are subject to that. It's not
Right.
just white people. We can go back in history. Black
Right.
people, some black people have been exactly the same way. So
Exactly.
pride, we talk about
Right.
one of those things, pride. And then we talk about ignorance. We've
Hmm.
already talked about that. That people are just want to be willingly ignorant. They just don't want to know the truth. And then the other
Hmm.
thing I talk about is lies, just plain old lies. I mean, gosh, I mean, have you ever
Right.
seen people
Right.
lie so much as they do today? I
Right.
have never seen anything
Hmm.
like this in all of my 57 years. I've seen some people lies,
Right.
and I have some really big liars in my
Hmm.
family, but
Right.
I've never seen people just flat out look you in your face
Right.
and just lie, just lie.
Rather lie than tell the truth. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. So just plain old lies.
Hmm.
And then I talk about just being passive. Another
Hmm.
root.
Right. Right.
So many people know that
Hmm.
racism is wrong.
Right.
Black and white, they know
Right.
it's wrong,
Right.
but they don't want to do anything about it.
Hmm.
They don't want to risk whatever they have going.
Right.
They don't want to risk losing quote unquote family or losing quote unquote friends or
Right.
losing status or becoming uh, uh, involved in
Hmm.
this movement or that movement.
Right.
But and so they just decide just to sit on the sideline and say, I'm
Right.
just not going to do anything. I'm
Hmm.
just going to sit right here and watch it out. So those are the types of things that keep racism intact. And unfortunately, brother, we're going to always have racism as long as we're on this earth.
Hmm.
You know?
So you don't think it ever go away? Well, I guess it ain't went away in all this time. It ain't never going going away. But the part that's kind of funny to me, it ain't funny, but uh, you know, even amongst African Americans, you find that it seemed like I don't know whether that was put in us over the years in slavery, but you find the light skinned against the
Yeah.
dark skinned.
Hmm.
It's like the light skinned think they're sometimes better than the
Hmm.
dark skinned,
Hmm.
and it's just so much stuff that we need to root out of our families
Hmm.
tree, and so
Yes.
we can move forward, so our families can move forward and realize that we all
Yes.
in this together.
Hmm.
And to realize that it's not, like you say, not just a white black thing, but other cultures are the same way.
Yes.
But we need to really, just like the flowers the flowers my wife put in the yard. They're all
Hmm.
different colors, and that's the
Yes.
way it is with us in this world. We're all different colors, different backgrounds, but you cut, you still bleed red.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it's important for us to know that the direction and the focus that we should focus on, we don't always do because,
Right.
like it's some people want more power. They want think that because they're this or that they're more powerful and you are less. Well, I
Hmm.
don't see that. I had to learn that uh, over
Hmm.
the years that people are equal and we need to
Yes.
treat people as an equal.
Hmm.
So and
Absolutely.
and if we I think if we could do that, we could even come together in the church and
Hmm.
worship in the church. But I read something in the book where you talked about uh, I forgot what page it was. I could go back and look at it. But you talked about you had to preach at a Caucasian church.
Hmm.
Tell us a little bit about that experience because I've had to
Yes.
do that before. When I pastored, I lived in an area where a lot of the churches
Hmm.
that I had an opportunity to minister was white.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. I had been praying for that day. I had been probably in the ministry maybe about 10 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really weighing heavily on me because all of the churches that I had preached at previously were black congregations.
Right.
And I kept praying for an open door to try and minister to my white brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, that opportunity came. Someone had given this church leader a
Mm-hmm.
CD with a sermon I had preached on at another church.
Right.
And this church elder reached out to me and said, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
I love that message. Can you come down here and preach?"
Right.
And I said, "Sure,
Right.
absolutely."
Mm-hmm.
And so I thank God. But when I drove up into that churchyard, a little small church in
Right.
Tennessee, I sat out there in that car before I got out, and I got to thinking, man, you know, I hope these people don't expect me to, uh, hound them with the sins of racism,
Right.
or break out in a spirited Negro spiritual or something. You know,
Woo! Yeah.
you know, I hope they're not expecting that out of me, because I'm just going to talk and just
Right.
share my experience about the passing of my son, and how Jesus Christ came
Mm-hmm.
and lifted us and carried us through it all.
Right.
And so I got out and I walked into that little bitty church,
Mm-hmm.
and person after person that I ran into, I kid you
Mm-hmm.
not, were genuinely happy to see me.
Right.
And I wasn't expecting that. I'm just going to be
Right.
honest with you. I was
Right.
not expecting that. I'm thinking, this man probably invited me because he just probably wanted them to, wanted a black person to come down. Maybe because he could say, well, we had a black preacher come down. So,
Right. Right. Mm, yeah.
but
Right.
these people were genuine.
Mm-hmm.
They were happy to see me. And you can tell when people are happy to see
Right.
you. Uh, the love,
Mm-hmm.
the the caring, the
Mm-hmm.
compassion that just emanated from those folks.
Right.
At that little bitty small white congregation made me think, now these people are really Christian.
Mm-hmm.
They really are. And so I shared the message. People seemed to like it. And afterwards, I was talking to this elderly gentleman. He had to be about maybe 80 something,
Right.
and he had lost his wife recently.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I were talking about struggling and just
Mm-hmm.
giving ourselves to Christ.
Right.
And so before we separated,
Mm-hmm.
he says to me, "Brother, I just want you to know that I love you."
Mm-hmm.
And he was looking straight at me in my eye.
Right.
He said, and I said, "Sir, I love you too," with a
Right.
smile. I
Right.
was smiling. And the man looked at me kind of puzzled
Right.
when I said, when I said, "I love you, sir," and I just started smiling. He looked at me kind of like puzzled.
Right.
And then, he finally said, you know, when I say I love you, I wasn't smiling. But when you say you love me, you were smiling.
Right.
And so I said, "Oh, okay, sorry." And then I said, "Okay, I love you." And then I didn't even smile. And then he smiled.
Well, I guess he thought his perception was because you smiled that you were just saying something.
Right, right,
You know what I
absolutely,
mean? Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like 2 weeks later, after that, I get this card in the
Mm-hmm.
mail. It's from him.
Right.
He's saying, how wonderful it was to meet me and everything, and
Mm-hmm.
this and that. And I mean, a really, really nice card.
Right.
And so I sent him one back,
Mm-hmm.
and I signed it. I said, "I just want you to know that I love you, and I'm not smiling."
Woo.
He got a kick out of that. I said,
Right.
"See, but it just goes to show you just how
Mm-hmm.
different culturally we are,
Right.
right?
Right.
And that we really need to learn more about each other."
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now that we've gotten that far, on where is this at? We where you talked about white and black challenges. Give us a little information on that.
Absolutely. I think that's one of the most talked about chapters in the Bible that seems to stir a whole lot of conversation from
Mm-hmm.
whites and from blacks. And it's kind of unique
Mm-hmm.
because I actually challenge both, which is what most books don't do.
Right.
Most books on racism tend to challenge white people, not so
Right.
much black people.
Mm-hmm.
So when I wrote my first version of this book,
Mm-hmm.
uh, someone wrote a review online. It was a black person, and it's a well
Mm-hmm.
known black person,
Right.
and he said, "I like the book, but it's missing a whole lot."
Right.
And he started talking about how black people have these issues too, but that's not really talked about in the book. So I went back and added some more. That's why
Mm-hmm.
we have version number two. And one of the things that I really dug in deep on was the black and white challenges. So let's
Right.
talk about some of the challenges.
Mm-hmm.
For for white people, I say that I would really challenge white people, okay, to really acknowledge the truth about the Confederacy. Is to
Right.
really learn more about it, not really learn more about it, learn more truth about it, and acknowledge the truth of it. Because
Right.
unfortunately, there are still some white brothers and sisters out there who say that race was not a factor in the Civil War,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we know that that's not true. And
Right.
so I I issue them that challenge is just to dig deeper into the Confederacy, and when you
Right.
do, you will find out that one of the foundational beliefs was racial supremacy,
Right.
and and one of the major causes of the war, in matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
was that Southern states wanted to keep slaves intact.
Right.
Okay, so we can't heal
Right.
if we don't acknowledge the truth,
Right.
and that's just the truth of that. And so that's one of the challenges that I issue. Now, the other challenge that I issue to my white brothers and sisters is this: rock the church boat. In other words, you got to start talking about racial issues with your congregations, and
Right.
that's just not happening nearly enough. It's
In
just
neither,
not.
in none of the churches.
Right, right,
Okay.
absolutely, absolutely. It's just not, and I think uh, people are fearful is part of it.
Right.
Just like you said, people are fearful of what is going to happen, what's going to be
Right.
opened up if they bring up a subject
Mm-hmm.
of race. Uh, they think it's going to be contentious, and it might. They
Right.
think there may be arguments, and there might, but
Right.
still, that's not a reason not to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And so they just choose just to be quiet about it,
Right.
and that's hurting us. That's hurting us because now we can't come together
Right.
because everybody has these misconceptions in their mind. So
Mm-hmm.
the things that I challenge black people on is this: we must create a safe place to have racial conversations. We got to
Right.
do that. uh, there are lots of people out there who really do want to, Dr. B. There
Mm-hmm.
are some people who just really, truly want to understand,
Right. When
but
you
they're
say
afraid.
when you say create a safe place, what do you mean?
That means create a place where white people and other people can talk to us and say what's really on their mind
Right.
without us jumping down their throats
Right.
or calling them racist
Mm-hmm.
or saying that you just don't understand,
Right.
or because doing those types of things will make people feel as if they have nothing to contribute to the
Right.
conversation,
Mm-hmm.
and they do you know so when I say create a safe place, I mean
Mm-hmm.
we have to make people feel comfortable approaching
Right.
us, and that was my whole purpose behind writing the book
Mm-hmm.
in that tone that I wrote it in. I wrote it in a very warm, loving, kind, caring tone. And
Right.
that's what a whole lot of people comment on when they actually
Mm-hmm.
review the book. They
Hmm.
love the tone
Right.
that I'm not yelling at them. I'm not
Right.
accusing them. I'm not trying to make them feel ashamed.
Hmm.
I'm just explaining some things
Right.
using general terms, you know.
Right.
So we have to make people feel comfortable coming to us and
Right.
talking to us about race.
Right.
So this is one question I asked a whole lot of my black friends. Is there a white person who has ever come to you and asked you a question about race? Have you ever had a white person to come to you and say, brother or sister, I got a question about race and I just feel like I can talk to you about
Right. Yeah, I can
it.
honestly say I've had that to happen to me on several occasions. And but at first they wouldn't. They had to get to know me a little bit because people, if you talk a little louder, they think you out there.
Yes.
So you have to make sure that you deliver when you talk to somebody with a decent tone, uh,
Hmm.
ready to say angry black man or something.
Yeah.
But but I've had people, and we've had that type of conversation, and uh, during the conversation, they would always say, "Well, I'm not trying to offend you. I'm not trying to offend you."
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
you ain't offending
Hmm.
me because
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Right.
ain't worried about what you're saying anyway. But but because it's your opinion against my opinion. We have
Yeah.
opinions.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
when I've had that conversation with some people, they actually come back again and start
Hmm.
asking questions because they get interested where they
Hmm.
feel you're not going to lash out or try to
Yes.
strike back or say you ain't nothing but a racist or something like that,
Yes. Yes.
and then you can get
Yeah.
understanding. But
Right.
on a large scale, no, you don't get that. I've never had that on
Yes.
a large scale, but you find a
Yes.
few people that'll come to you after they get to know you a little bit
Uh-huh.
and start asking
Hmm.
questions that they never knew. So
Yes. Yes.
uh,
Absolutely. 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 And then another challenge that I issue to us is this. We got to acknowledge the racism even among us.
yeah,
Like you already,
definitely,
like you
yeah,
mentioned,
hmm
light skin against dark skin.
hmm
Um, this first black mentality.
right,
Well, what am I talking about? I mean, whenever a black person is the first to
right,
get something, first to
right,
win something, the first
hmm
black person to be awarded something,
right,
it's like instead of us being happy about that and being
right,
supportive, sometimes we can get jealous, you know?
exactly, yeah,
Yeah,
that happens
yeah,
a lot,
yeah. And so there are some black people who are out there laying traps for other black people
yeah,
because they don't want them to become the first. They
right,
want to become the
right,
first. I mean, I've already experienced that in my life. When I
right,
ran for office.
hmm
There was somebody else who wanted to be the the first black to
right,
represent the
right,
district. I mean,
hmm
just so happened I was, but I wasn't planning on it that way. It's just it
right,
just turned out that way. But
right,
see, but there was somebody else who wanted to be
hmm
the first and just
right,
spreading rumors and just doing all kinds of crazy stuff.
hmm
You know, so we have to acknowledge that there is some stuff going on even among us
right,
that truly needs to be called out. It
hmm
needs to be confessed, and it
right,
needs to be talked about and dealt with.
right,
You know, but we don't hear a whole lot of that.
no. Mhm.
We should though.
And just like a discussion like this, you would think you would get a lot of people leaving a comment, but discussions like this, now if you was being radical, uh,
Hmm.
saying something way out there, everybody be commenting. But when you have discussion like this, when you try to reason together, come to
Yes.
truth, open some eyes to things, you don't hear much
Hmm.
because we
Absolutely.
react
Hmm.
to the, what I call the rough side of the mountain instead of
Yes.
a
Yes.
calm wave, a calm stream or something. If it
Hmm.
get radical, yeah, we ready to jump in. So
Oh,
uh,
absolutely.
it's a
Absolutely.
different story.
Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, trying to find my way,
Right.
and growing up during the civil rights era and having all
Mhm.
this stuff going on, one of my favorite people to listen to was a radical,
Right.
militant black man
Right. Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
thought very highly of, and, and,
Right.
and actually still do, Malcolm
Hmm.
X.
Right.
I mean, I used to love to listen to Malcolm X because
Right.
he would say stuff like, if somebody put their hand on you, put them in the grave.
Yeah.
Be like, right on, brother.
Yeah. Ah, yeah.
So see, it's like, but you gotta be peaceful.
Right.
Try our best to be peaceful
Hmm.
and talk to folks in a respectful way,
Right.
and then they will then open up to us.
Hmm.
Okay, and then next time you know, you have two people talking. You
Right.
know, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a good thing to do it. Do things calmly. Now, when I was younger, I wouldn't study calm. Uh, I was the
Yeah, me
same
neither.
way. I wanted. Hey, let's get it. And
Yeah.
but now you get older and wiser, and you realize if you want to really promote change, you have to
Yes.
do things in a calm uh, manner, in a way
Hmm.
that people can make sense of it. I don't care what
Yes.
color you are, your background. You need to come to them in a sensible way. Use common sense and not trying to do things to raise. I just say raise hell. So
Yes.
um,
Yes.
it,
Absolutely.
it's just too easy to do that in
Hmm.
life. And I look me the way I look at things, especially now that I done hit 60. Uh, uh, you don't know how many years you got left, and then with
Yes.
this
You're
COVID, you
right.
don't know what's coming up. So
Yes, you're right.
it's just so many
Absolutely.
things, and to know people that even these last 2 years, and I got to come on this. These last 2 years made me do an evaluation on a lot of things,
Hmm.
uh, far as my life is concerned, to make sure that I'm
Yeah.
doing things in the right manner,
Right.
treat people in the right way, uh, don't be trying to beat nobody out of anything or anything. Just do
Hmm.
things what I call the right way. And
Yes.
because, like I say, I know too many people that has had COVID and they're not here today. So,
Yes.
and
Yes.
even coworkers that
Wow.
didn't make it through. So
Wow.
I'm thankful to God, and that makes me uh, looking at that makes me realize that I need to act
Yes.
and react in the right way.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely, Doc. Absolutely. And the last thing that I want to share about us, of people of color, is that we need to be very, very careful of what I call race projection. Race
explain
pro
that.
race projection. Okay,
Hmm.
so to project something, right? We all know what that means. That means
Hmm.
to cast something
Hmm.
or to put something on someone. And
Right,
sometimes we can give people racist labels, right?
right,
When they're actually not racist. And
exactly.
sometimes we can take words, we can
Hmm.
misunderstand situations,
Hmm.
and we can actually think that a person is a racist
Right,
when they're really not.
right,
And so, what we really need to really step back and realize is that people do bad things to us all the
right,
time,
right. Hmm.
but all the time is not because of race.
Right.
You know, example, I was younger, and I
Hmm.
was into bodybuilding when I was younger. So,
Hmm.
and I used to love to wear these T-shirts to to show off my muscles. And I had a bald head, and one day I was walking through this grocery store. I had on sunglasses, bald head, T-shirt, muscles everywhere.
Radical.
Right. I'm walking
Ah.
down this aisle, and I'm
Mhm.
looking for something. And in the distance, probably about 10, 15 feet away, I see this elderly Caucasian lady. And
Mhm.
she's got her purse, she's got a
Clutch that bad
basket,
boy.
and she is looking at something.
Mhm.
And I'm walking down the same aisle. I'm looking for my object, right? Because I'm
Mhm.
not really paying too much attention to her. And so but I do notice that as I get closer to her,
Right.
she looks at me and
Mhm.
she takes her purse It
Yeah, yeah.
holds it closer to her.
I've had that. Yeah.
And I just kind of walked on by, and once I walked by, I kind of peeked back, and I noticed that she kind of relaxed herself. Now, was that because she's a racist, or was that because she saw an intimidating figure
Mhm.
coming toward her, and
Right,
she didn't? She just that just made her feel uncomfortable. Would
right,
a white person with a lot of muscles, bald head, and sunglasses, would she have reacted the same way? I have no idea.
right,
you know. But see, I have to give her the benefit of the doubt. But
right.
now this other situation right here that
Mhm,
happened to me, and I was so lucky that
mhm.
I did not do what I started to do. I was in
Right.
a grocery store. Now this is much later. This may have been about 2 or 3 years ago. I was in a grocery store, and you know how they have these self checkout lines. Everybody
Right.
brings their stuff up and check out. And they always have this one person, one employee working that line.
Mhm.
So this day, all these spots were full. All these
Right.
self checkout spots were full, and I was
Mhm.
checking out at one, and several other people checking out the other one. And I just happened to notice that the person who worked there walked up close to me, as if he was looking at me scan my items. And
See,
so
see, you gonna steal
yeah, yeah, I just casually look around, and
right,
I notice all these people in line paying for this stuff, and I notice they're all white, and
right.
I'm the only black one standing there checking it out. And this person is kind of, young man just kind of walked up, just kind of stood
Mhm.
there looking at me, and I'm thinking in my mind,
Right.
I'm thinking, I ain't got to steal nothing in this store. I can pay for my stuff. You got
Right.
some nerve trying to walk up here beside me. I
Mhm.
really ought to tell you a thing or two. I wonder if there is there any church folks in here who know
Right.
me.
Right. Ah.
So all this stuff is going through my
Mhm.
mind, right? Because I
Right.
have painted this person
Mhm.
as a racist.
Right.
And right before I say something, because I was just
Mhm.
about to say something,
Right.
I just kind of looked at him and I said, "Hey, young man, how you doing?" And he looked at me and said, "Fine, sir. How you doing?" I said, "Great." I just kind of looked at him, expecting him to say something. He was expecting me to say something. And then I guess he must have noticed that I was kind of saying, "Why are you standing here?"
Right.
And
Right.
so he says, "Oh," he says, "I saw you had coupons, and I have to put my code in
Right.
order to finish your checkout. So that's why I'm here." And I went, "That's very thoughtful, young man. I really do appreciate it." And I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't go off and say, "What would
Right.
you stand here beside me for?
Right.
I can pay
Right.
for my stuff."
Right.
So right then I had projected, I had
Mhm.
given him an attitude. I
Right.
had labeled him something that he obviously was not. He was just trying to be, efficient,
Right.
to just come and stand there so he'd be right there to type in his code. I
Mhm.
didn't know. You see? So
Made an
how
assumption. Ah, yeah.
made an assumption.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's what we have to be careful of. That's what
Right.
I keep saying is that everything is not about racism. And
Right.
sometimes we make things about racism that is
Right.
not.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. It's. I guess it depends on how you were raised, what you were
Mm,
raised around. Um, me growing up, I never went to a segregated school. I heard about it in the South, but I'm up north. I never dealt with it. Kindergarten mixed, so it's like I got my worst rude awakenings when I went in the military. So it's
mm,
like I heard about it,
yeah.
seen a lot of stuff on TV, but hadn't experienced some of it.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, I,
Yeah, I did.
yeah. So it's
I
like
did. Yeah, we got bused to an all white school. I spent my
right,
first and second year in a what they would call a Negro school. growing up. It was a
Mhm.
small little school not far from where we live, but because of the laws, the
Mhm.
integration laws, this federal government stepped in and said you got
Right.
to integrate these schools. So
So
they
is this in
bust out the.
Huntsville?
This is when this is in Madison, little
Okay.
rural place here in
Mhm.
Madison.
Right.
So we got bused. Our whole neighborhood, whole black
Mhm.
neighborhood, got bused to a white school about 20 miles away from where we live.
Mhm.
And the first day when our bus drove up on the school property,
Mhm.
and the bus driver who was also black opened up the door, there stood the principal of the school right there in front of
Mhm.
the door,
Mhm.
and he asked a question. He said, "Where you going with them boatload of ends?"
Oh, are you serious?
I'm serious.
Wow.
That's what that and that's the first day. So
Wow.
you see, I mean, we had there were issues, there were skirmishes, there wasn't any major fights, but finally they got the right people in the right leadership positions to
Right.
to kind of help things smooth along a little.
Right.
But overall, it was a great experience for
Mhm.
me. But like you said, it was a eye opener,
Right.
but it was great. It was a great experience. Yeah.
You know, growing up, you hear about, I heard about, people picking cotton, chopping cotton. I really didn't know what they were talking about. I was actually 21 when I first seen cotton, and it
Really?
wasn't in the South. I, I was in I was stationed in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. We're actually in Glendale, next to Phoenix. Uh, and I stopped at these people's house that I knew they're friends with, and I asked them, "What is that stuff across the street?" Because I didn't know what it was. I'm 21 years old now, and they
Wow.
told me it's cotton. I said, "You lying? There ain't no cotton." I said, "Ain't no cotton in Arizona." But yeah, that was my first experience with cotton. So
Oh my goodness.
so over the years, I've asked people about the process and stuff because I had no idea and they really hadn't seen it. Growing up,
God.
I'm used growing up where I'm from. We used to blueberry fields and stuff
Yeah.
like that. We
Okay.
pick
Yeah.
blueberries, but
Hmm. Man, you rather pick blueberries anytime than to pick cotton.
woo,
I did. I did it all the time. I know, boy, it's rough. It's just rough. But you know what? Those were some of my best memories
right,
because we did it as a family, as a community. Just about
right,
everybody who was somebody was out there picking cotton. So we all out there together, even
hmm,
kids run around. So it was like it was a community thing, you know.
right,
But it was some experience, and it was hard. You had to put these big sacks over your back,
hmm,
and that actually drug the ground behind you,
wow,
and you had to bend over because these cotton stalks were right at waist high. So
right,
you would have to bend over and then put your hand on this little cotton bowl because the cotton was stuffed out into a bowl like
hmm.
that had stickers on the end of it. So you had to
Yeah, I
be
heard that
careful.
had some stickers.
Yeah, you couldn't. Yeah, and
So
many times I come on with my hands all splintered up because of those
wow,
stickers. So it was, and then you had to put it in that sack, and you had to just keep doing it until that sack was full. And when that sack is full, you take that one off, you give it to whoever who was ever over the place, and you got another
hmm.
sack. You put it on your shoulder, and you kept on doing it, and that was it.
So did you
You
get
know,
paid by the weight, or how did you get
you,
paid on this stuff?
yes, you get paid by the actual weight. So at the
Hmm,
end of the day,
hmm.
everybody would weigh their sacks, and they paid so much per pound.
Right.
And so I mean, so back in my day, you were doing real good if you picked cotton all day and got maybe $10, $15 a day.
Woo! Wow.
Yeah, you were out there from sun up to sundown,
Right.
and if you got $10, you were doing
Mhm.
good. You know, so
I'm glad, I'm glad I learned how to work on cars.
yeah,
Woo! That's been rough, boy.
you were better off, brother. You were a whole lot better off.
I was better off getting greasy than that
Yeah.
going on. Woo.
Yeah, yeah, and you had to do that within
Right.
80, 90-degree weather. It was
Mm-hmm.
hot out there. It was
Ooh.
hot. Okay, with no toilets. Now there were no porta potties. We
Right.
didn't nobody had that stuff. You had to go into the weeds,
Mm-hmm.
do what you need to do, and come on back out.
Woo.
I mean, that's just the way it was, man. You know.
Well, I'm glad that I didn't have to
Yes,
deal with that growing
yes.
up.
You are very fortunate.
Uh, I'm glad we had indoor toilets and stuff. So, yeah. Woo, man. The thought. That's a thought I
Yes.
wouldn't want. I
Yeah.
think about going into these porta potties that they have out on the work site or something like that.
Hmm.
I can
Hmm.
imagine going into something like that.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think the Lord, yeah, I was born up north.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In the book, I talk about my mother, and I talk
Mm-hmm.
about her hands,
Mm-hmm.
and I talk about how bruised, beaten, battered, scarred up her hands were to
Right.
be a female. That her hands, I talk about her hands were not beautiful, smooth. Her nails were not finely,
Right.
manicured, just like
Mm-hmm.
most women should be. Her hands were, represented the really tough parts of her life. You know,
Right.
and I, remember that because I used to have to rub alcohol on her hands.
Mm-hmm.
After one of those grueling days, she would tell me, "Boy, go get the alcohol." And I go in and get the alcohol. She'd sit down, she put her hands there, and I just kind of rub them, alcohol, and she would kind of jump, because it would hurt. And then the
Burn. Yeah.
next day, she right back out there,
Got to
and
do it again.
gotta
Woo.
do it again. Yeah,
Well, Doc, I guess we better get close to winding up. What would you like to leave with the people um, about the book? Any information that you can give them to obtain it or anything like that? I personally think it's a good read, uh, and like I say, I've purchased some more. I'm waiting on them to come in to
absolutely.
give to somebody uh,
Yes,
because I think the book will be beneficial if a person reads it. So.
yes, absolutely, absolutely. If you want to read a book on race that doesn't sound like an argument, doesn't have a whole lot of tension in it,
Hmm.
but a book that is written in a tone that is warm, uh, soft, sounds like a conversation with a really, really good friend,
Right.
then this is the book. This is the book. This is it right here. That's why I wrote it. And you can find this book on Amazon,
Hmm.
Amazon.com. The title again is Black and White Healing Racial Divide. The author is C.L. Holly. You can type
Hmm.
in my name on Amazon, C.L. Holly, and it'll show you all my books. So go there. You can read reviews on the book. You can even do a sample read. You can just open it up, and I think the first few pages of the chapter you can actually read.
Hmm.
So go to Amazon. This is a very, very good book. It won an international award. Okay, second place
Hmm.
for outstanding nonfiction, according
Wow.
to the Book Fest book
Hmm.
contest, which is a huge contest from people all around the world. This year they had over 350 entries into that contest. And this book won second place in the
Right.
category of nonfiction and social sciences. So that's a huge accomplishment.
Hmm.
Never thought that that would happen, but apparently people see the value in this book.
Right.
Get the book. Please get the book. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, does not
Right.
matter.
Right.
Get the book. I promise you, you will find out something that you did not know.
Yeah. And before we go, as I read it, I realized that the book wasn't. Uh, it's titled Black and White, but it can apply to any race, any people.
Yes,
So
yes,
it's a good read.
yes.
I give it thumbs up,
Thank you.
and We want to thank you for coming on today. Do a second part, and I hope to get you back on again and do some things. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and just keep writing the books. And
Yes.
once you write the next one, let's come back and do it again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure for these last
Hmm.
two shows to
Hmm.
be on here talking with you and going back. Thank you so very much.
All right, bless you now.
All right. Bye bye.